I did not write anything down, and now I am full of regret a little bit. Just because there's a lot of things bouncing around up here, so I'm gonna try and not be super wrangly. I really wanted to talk tonight because this is really awesome. I have to say that like a type of event like this in and of itself feels really healing for me. It's really nice to have people come out and be like, these people care. I can just talk about myself and normalize. That's really, really awesome. So thank you, Layla. That's really, really great. Yeah, I started dealing with mental illness when I was about 16. So that's about a decade of my life that on and off I've been really heavily impacted in many different ways. It started getting really bad when I was in university. I ended up having to drop out twice because I wanted to get it done, but my anxiety just would not let me. So I started to take on less, and I started trying to kind of figure out what was happening. And kind of like Callum, it was like a slow, gradual wave for me where I didn't realize how hard I was struggling, and things just kept getting more and more difficult because I wasn't getting help. And when you're ill and you don't get help, you get sicker. So eventually I moved to Halifax, and I decided that I would go on antidepressants because I could not work anymore. I was having panic attacks at work, and I was having to call in sick for work, and I was worried that I would get fired. So I started taking medication, and then I could work. That's good. But then I kept getting worse, and the medication wasn't helping as much anymore. So I started dealing with the mental health system for really the first time. And I went into Bears Road, and they told me, basically they said, cool, you have an appointment to talk to somebody, it's in 8 months. And I was like, great, that's awesome. So I went and I talked to somebody, and they were really judgmental, and I didn't go back. But things started getting worse, and eventually I decided this is my anxiety, I have a lot more going on, and so I ended up trying to get like actual help, because I started having, and it's really cool that this like the SOSNS thing touches on suicidal ideation, because I feel weird even saying the word suicide in front of this many people, but my reality is that for 2 months of this year, ended up having non-stop suicidal ideation for like 2 entire months. And at this point I was working because I had to pay my rent, and I was waiting for my appointment with Bears Road. And for the first time in my life, I was really just like completely incapacitated by my mental illness. Just completely like wrote off, but I still had to keep going to work. So I literally went into work and told all my coworkers, I want to die, like big time, actually. And I'm here, and I might have a breakdown, and I'm gonna try and keep it together. So they were really supportive. My family was really supportive. Over this time, I dealt with like the mental health system a couple of times. The first time that I had like a suicidal meltdown, basically just me being like, I am not safe, I don't know what to do. My little sister lives in the city, so luckily I always had somebody really close by. But so we ended up going into Emerge, and at this point I had been crying like hysterically for probably an hour, and I couldn't calm myself down, so we went into Emerge, and they put me in a room with a mother and a daughter, and I was still full-blown hysterical. And these people were looking at me like I was a circus animal, because I was just a mess. So they put me in this room, and I laid on the floor, and I cried for 3 more hours. And when I went up to ask, do I know somebody is coming? Can you tell me anything? The woman at the counter looked so inconvenienced every time that I dared to ask if somebody was going to come help me in my utter mental duress. So I was in this room for 3 hours. I had to go and ask for a blanket. It was freezing in there. These people were staring at me. They brought in new people. I waited in the emerge for 5 hours. And eventually, at the end of this whole episode, was pretty traumatized and pretty exhausted and just had to go home. I didn't get seen by anybody. I waited as long as I could. They sent me home with a card for the mobile mental health crisis unit, which I did not know has 10 people, but less than 10 people, but that makes sense because the next time that I had a suicidal meltdown, I called them. I was like, oh, this cool card, I didn't know this existed. They were like, oh, they'll come to your house, they will talk to you, it's great. I called them and it was busy for 15 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, and when they come to your house, it's a police officer, which is like super comforting, right? So, yeah, it was busy for 15 minutes, and at this point, I kind of started to feel really, really, really scared. Because there's only so much, I'm so lucky to have such a good family. I'm also very emotional, so just give me 1 second.
We love you.
I'm so lucky to have such a good family, but they're not trained to deal with me. My friends aren't trained to deal with me. I can hardly even deal with me, and I know what my brain looks like, so I get it. And I wanted people who knew what they were doing, but the second time, so this is the third meltdown, the second time I went into emerge, and met with some people. They sat down, I waited, the guy came back, and he handed me a card to the mobile mental health crisis unit and told me that I was gonna have to go home. And I'm a little bit stubborn and a little bit vocal, which can be helpful. So I looked at him and I said, I called them last time and it was busy for 15 minutes. What happens if I call them again and that happens? And he said, well, there's nothing else we can do for you today. And I looked him in the face and I said, does somebody need to try and kill themselves before they get taken seriously in this hospital? Because that's the impression that I'm getting. At which point my mother said, don't threaten your doctor. And I said, that's not what's happening. I am just literally telling you that if this isn't a place where we can be proactive, what are you guys doing here? And so he said, let me go see what I can do. And I was like, yeah. And so at that point, I got recommended to a day treatment program that they told me I could call and check my status of the wait list. I called 3 different numbers. There's not a lot of numbers for Abby Lane on the website, by the way. I called 3 different numbers, and everybody told me they had no idea how to tell me anything. And I was like, cool, I'll just keep hanging around. So my experience with the mental health system ended up in pretty much utter defeat. I just said, okay, I'm on my own here. I am gonna have to deal with this because all of the wait times are 6 months to 2 years. And when you go in and you say, I am on the edge and I need help, what more can you say to someone to let them know that you need help? And I just didn't feel heard. So I pretty much gave up on it. And I'm really happy to see this petition because I know that so many of us feel this way. And it just isn't right because people are sick and lives are at risk and they need help. But in the meantime, for that, there's been all kinds of really incredible suggestions that I could repeat again, but I probably won't. We obviously need frontline support big time. And I agree, the system can be improved, but I've heard some suggestions of a 24-hour receptive shelter. And that to me is my dream. Some people that care and are there and want to like help you as a friggin' human, yeah, that's the dream. That's awesome.
Wow, that would work, wouldn't it?
Yeah, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be awesome? This was a suggestion that I saw on Callum's status, actually. I can't even say that I came up with that. Her name was Ingrid. She's awesome. But yeah, so this conversation, I'm so happy to see it finally happening. I think it's really, really great. In the meantime, you know, we as people can help one another, and I just wanted to touch a little bit on the concept of like holding space for people, because that's pretty much, as somebody who has struggled with mental illness, like the one thing that will just save you is having people that when you're having a suicidal meltdown and like crying your face off, or if you're hysterical, or if you're in psychosis, or if you're having a panic attack, or if you're just like manically rambling about the fact that your brain is a disaster, to have people that will just sit there and experience you completely as you are is the most healing thing that can happen. To know that you can have an open dialogue and tell your coworkers and tell your friends, and know that you have people that will not make you feel like you're an other, or like you're different, or like you're a burden in the meantime until we sort this mess out. Holding space is like so key, and the people that have done that for me in my life have saved my life. So that's all I have to say.